And if my connection for some reason drops out, I'll be right back. I actually am on top of a mountain with little to no connection to internet service, so it's a lot of fun. So tonight we have Craig Ford, who is an author and a cybersecurity expert, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I
Yeah,
can't wait
Craig
to
does so many things.
right. So I'm looking forward to hearing from Craig. To get started, I don't have a whole lot of news this week, other than the fact that had a conversation with Range Force. Range Force is going to provide the cyber range for what will soon be an esports league for hackers. The idea was kind of born, I guess it was like a year ago when I was in the UK, and thought about having like an esports league like the gamers have. They make a lot of money, they get sponsorships, they have teams, and it's a lot of fun for everybody. Um, this way, we can get people jump started into careers, and the people with really good defense and red teaming skills will shine and kind of stick out, and it'd be a good place for recruiting and moving into the industry. Other than that, no changes on the political front. Yeah, the U.S. is still a mess. Big surprise there. Our president seems to stumble and trip upstairs, which is unique. I've never seen a president do that before. But I guess that's a superpower I don't possess. Anyways, so let's get started. Craig, it's awesome to have you on. I'm so glad you were able to make it. Sorry for the late start. I guess the time change kind of messing people up. So I'm sure we'll have some stragglers. So why don't you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do, and we'll go from there.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks for inviting me anyway. It's definitely a pleasure to talk to you guys. And so just about me in general, cybersecurity architect by day, um, cybersecurity, now a fantasy author outside of that. Been in sort of a IT kind of a role back in early 2000s, somewhere like that, and made my way slowly towards cybersecurity. When I sort of got that bug around, I think it was around 2013, I started pushing that cybersecurity direction, and yeah, pretty much loved it ever since, and been pushing that way the whole time. Yeah, it's a great industry. I think we have some problems, but every industry does, I think. But yeah, it's definitely good.
Yeah, absolutely. So I did a little bit of digging into your series of books. Tell us a little bit about your books and what your goal is with those two books you have.
So the first two books, basically, it's a Hacker IM series. It's a bit of a tongue-in-cheek name. Same with if you have a look at the cover itself, it's a bit of a. I've always had a bit of an issue with the media's depiction of hackers and always the bad guys and that sort of thing. So that was kind of part of the cover idea and the name itself, to have a bit of a tongue-in-cheek poke at that. But the idea with the books was, when I was sort of trying to get into security, no one was really talking about it. No one was really sharing any of the information and that sort of stuff, and making it easy for outsiders to understand a little bit about it, and for people wanting to come into the industry. So I kind of wrote the series in as non-technical way as you could probably do it, and tried to make it so it was something that everyone would enjoy. I used sort of stories, and I think there's about 50 chapters in each of the books, or different topics across the cybersecurity. From your IoT to your autonomous vehicles, you name it. I've pretty much tried to do as non-technical coverage as possible, and I like to use sort of your random stories. I go down a bit of a rabbit hole and try and make a journey out of it, so you can have a bit of fun and learn at the same time.
Well, what's
And I
your
think
favorite
that's
chapter?
good. What was that, sorry?
What's one of your favorite chapters in your book?
I think my favorite one is the one that I named the book after, The Hacker I Am. I have a bit of a sort of a storytelling of what it would be like for a hacker to be, trying to break into a system and that sort of stuff, and sort of make it a fun journey, and do that poker fun at the media depiction, sort of saying it's just normal guy and ends up being just a security guy just trying to protect the system. But that's probably my favorite out of all of them. And I've got a few. I think there was an assassination story that I said for someone with a medical IoT device. I had a bit of a bit of a story with that, bit of a short story. It was, yeah, I had a bit of fun in quite a few of them. It's definitely different when you're talking about a cybersecurity book. It's not your normal style. And the other weird thing is you can actually literally pick up the book and choose any chapter you want. You don't have to read it in order. Just pick a topic you like the idea of and just read that.
That's awesome. So what drove you to write a book? I've been toying with the idea, but writing a book is so intimidating, I
Daunting.
think.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
daunting
Yeah.
and intimidating, and I'm afraid if I start that I'm just going to get lost in the process. So tell me what went through your head when you were deciding to or not to write a book, and what it was like going through the process.
I think with the deciding the book part was a little bit easier because I'd already been doing some cybersecurity journalist stuff, like writing sort of similar content
Hmm.
for CSO for a little while. And a few of my colleagues said, "Look, we really like your stuff. You should make a book in the same sort of style of writing." And I'm like, you know, if you'd asked me 5 years ago if I was ever going to write articles or books or anything, I would have just laughed at you and said, "That's not going to happen."
Exactly.
But yeah, that people were enjoying it, and I thought, well, that's my way of sort of sharing it. But I think the easiest way with the book was I took it in small pieces. I just went, I'm just going to write the chapter at a time, go through it piece by piece, and then just put it together slowly like that. And I think my book made it a little bit easier because it is individual topics, so it wasn't one big component. My new book, the fantasy, is a little bit different because it is one full story, which was
Oh,
a
nice.
bit more challenging to do. But
Nice.
yeah, the two cybersecurity awareness sort of style ones that were much easier with those individual little chapters. You just chunk by chunk, and it
Yeah.
wasn't too scary that way. But I think probably the scariest part was whether people would actually want to read it once I
Hmm.
wrote it. I was like sitting there going, "Oh, am I putting this all together? Is it all this hard work and no one's even going to want to read it?" But turns out it was people like it, so that's good.
It's pretty awesome. Yeah, I saw it on Amazon. Actually selling for like 30 US dollars on Amazon. Book one is. Um, so yeah, I think it's really interesting to take that experience and the knowledge you've gained inside of cybersecurity and kind of give it back in that way. And the storytelling part of it is really cool, right? So a lot of the tech and the hacking books and stuff like that, it's all very technical. It's all very black and white, and it's all very ones and zeros. So you can't really read it from cover to cover, which I think kind of does a disservice to both the author and the crowd that it generates attraction to. But with the story approach, I think Kevin Mitnick had a book something similar where he told stories about stuff that happened, Ghost on the Wire, and kind of put into a story perspective. And I find that more approachable and digestible than these big penguin published thick manuals that take 6 months to even get through. So that's really refreshing. I think it's really cool. Did you go through a publisher to do it? Did you publish it yourself?
I had a bit of a chat to do with a few of the normal sort of publishing houses, but I ended
Mhm.
up going the sort of indie publishing, the self-publishing route, only for the fact that they wanted to try and change that path that I wanted to go down.
Oh
And
yeah,
it sort of, I didn't really like that idea. I wanted to just stick to that general idea and do it as the way I wanted to do it with those sort of stories. They wanted to make it one long book. And like you said, I think they're a bit dry and a bit hard to get through sometimes, those sort of books. And I
yeah.
wanted to make it a bit more fun, a bit more easy. So yeah, I did the self-publishing.
Yeah. Are you going to, do you have any plans on writing a book about maybe cyber law or even like a children's book, strictly for children about like internet safety or stuff like that? Has that crossed your mind about the series of books, or what are your thoughts
It's
on
not
that?
something I've thought of. I've seen a few of the like sort of your children books one. I think they're great. Um,
Mm,
and I definitely think it's a good idea. It's probably not my style of thing, but yeah,
yeah.
I wouldn't say no if that was something that sort of went down that path. But yeah, definitely not a consideration. I've had the more serious, like your cyber law stuff,
Yeah.
probably not my cup of tea for sure.
Yeah.
um, I'm a bit more of a, I don't know, like to have a bit more fun with it than I think they'd be a bit too dry for my liking. But
Yeah.
yeah, you never know.
Yeah, I think one of the dilemmas that I'm trying to solve, the equation I'm trying to solve, is the fact that, especially in the UK and other countries, the kids aren't really getting instruction on what the law really is, what's legal, what's illegal. I was, just looking at the way that you wrote the book and the stories and stuff, I thought, it might be a good vehicle to get the CMA and other laws like that broken down into a digestible format for the kids to read, and those events will stick out in their head more than a teacher telling them about CMA or what's illegal or illegal. So I think it's really cool. I've seen a lot of guys go into being an author from cybersecurity. A buddy of mine named Robert Hansen did a few books. I'm sure Chris Roberts has his hands in quite a few. So I think it's a really cool way to give back. I haven't gone that route yet. I'm still kind of debating on if that's something I'm going to do, but I find it really intriguing. I find that, working on something like that, it seems to be really neat and really cool. I'm just, I know there's got to be a monotonous, mundane, grueling part of it somewhere hidden, hidden beneath all the leaves somewhere. So anyways, what brought you into cybersecurity? So tell us about your journey from like school age into the industry. What other occupations did you toss around going into, and kind of what was the mindset of going into something IT or cyber?
I think sort of what I was originally tossing up, I wanted to either be a chef or a mechanic. It's a bit of a weird combination, but I sort of love the cooking, doing that sort of stuff. The only thing I didn't like was the working when everyone else is having a good time. That didn't seem great to me when I was 18, 19. So and the mechanic side of things, my father was a mechanic, so he basically warned me off it. Although I like cars, he said all you'll do is spend the rest of your life with skin off your knuckles. So he said try and find something else to do. And to be honest, the IT technical side of thing, I just sort of fell in it. I was just always a bit of a natural, always a tinker with the electronic stuff, and always love anything electronic. So yeah, it was just a bit of a natural, an opportunity come up, and I just took it, and yeah, never stopped basically.
Well,
So back in, I think it was around 2000 or 2001 or something, I started out, and it's seems like a long time ago now, but
yeah, it does. Yeah, it makes sense though, to go from wanting to be a mechanic to wanting to be in IT. I mean, basically we're doing the same thing just without all the oil and grunge and stuff like that.
pretty
Although
much, yeah.
although the fan dust from the motherboard can get pretty bad on allergies sometimes. Um, so yeah, other than that, like, do you involve yourself with any like capture the flags or any kind of like online gaming, or what's your personal life look like? What's your passion other than writing and doing what you do career wise?
Bit of a movie buff. I don't get into too much of your capture your flag sort of stuff. I generally, apart from the writing, I stick away from the
Tech.
computers. I think work stuff during the day, you kind of just leave it over it, not going near any of that.
Yeah,
But yeah, Joe, bit of a movie fan. I love the sort of your sci-fi or your actiony kind of stuff.
Did
cool.
you watch the latest Justice League?
I haven't yet, but I want to. I reckon it's going to be pretty cool.
Yeah, like the Mandalorian. I think that's about as
Oh, that's a
sci-fi
great series.
and tech as I get is the Mandalorian.
It's on my
But
list. I haven't started it yet, but it's on my
oh,
list.
yeah, you definitely want to put that on the top of your list and make sure you watch the second season because, yeah, it's fantastic.
Gets better.
Yeah,
Okay.
a lot better. Um, so yeah, tell us what like your position you're in at work and kind of your day to day routine, if you will, for people who might not know what that position entails and looking at different opportunities within the cyber community. Kind of give us a rundown of what your day looks like and the type of duties you may carry out.
I think it's a bit of a, I suppose you would say, a jack of all trades kind of security position. I do a little bit from your consulting stuff with sort of clients and advising them and discussing what they've got and that sort of thing.
Hmm.
I do a bit of incident response and these days a lot of paperwork. I don't know if they've seen my writing and think I'm really good at the writing stuff these days. So it's a bit of the mundane side. I do a lot of like procedures and that sort of stuff.
Right.
But somebody's got to do them, so it might as well be me, I guess.
Yeah.
But yeah, generally sort of everyday kind of sort of thing is mostly your consulting. I do probably 3 or 4 on-site consulting stuff a week at least in most times, and your sort of your basic incident response, which is not as exciting as it sounds most of the time. A lot of it's just log reviews and event reviews, but it sounds pretty exciting, but it's not really most of the time.
Right.
What are some of the pain points? What are some of like the pain points that you run across when you're dealing with all these different customers in the industry? What are they struggling with when it comes to cybersecurity?
I think from the conversations I have, most of them, it's the biggest issues is probably understanding and knowing what they can do. And because I do a lot of that sort of in my sort of past up until now, sort of that small to medium enterprise sort of size.
Mhm.
And a lot of them just don't understand exactly what they can do. And a lot of the time it's just little things they can do to just improve things, like with your multi-factor authentication, just awareness with their staff, talking about it more, and making it a bit more of an open culture in a lot of those places where, you know, if you click on something you shouldn't do or you open something you shouldn't do, just go talk about it and don't be too concerned about having those discussions with your organization or your managers and stuff. I think the culture is probably a definite pain point I think they have, and that people are working on it, and I think it's getting better. But yeah, I think people focus a lot of the time a little bit too much on the flashy technology and don't focus on that sort of basic stuff and their stuff. And yeah, I think things would be a lot easier if they just go back to that sort of basic level.
That's
Yeah.
so interesting that you say that, because I've heard it so many times when, I talk to different customers. It's everyone's talking about the latest technology, the latest jargon and acronyms. But surprisingly, what I hear from a lot of security professionals is that it's always about the basics.
Mm.
So it's so interesting that so many companies are struggling with just the foundation, right?
Yeah, I think so. And I think that's probably, I don't know if it's the marketing or the media from the big vendors and stuff like that. They're pushing you need these big silver bullet solutions, which we all know there is no silver bullet. But yeah, I think if we try and change that conversation as much as we can and make it more about those basics, I think everyone's going to be more secure, and our lives will be easier too, I think. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's a bit of a challenge, but I think, yeah, we'll get there eventually.
Yeah, that's the hardest part, I think, is the basics. That, and for companies to actually like develop some sort of people skills, because they're so used to treating people like employees and not like people, and not creating like that next level interaction or relationship with their people. It can drag a whole unit down. I remember working in security in oil and gas, and walking into a different group or a different part of the cubicle farm, and the looks on people's faces when they see you coming, it's like the Imperial Death March on Star Wars. You can hear it in the background, and people are starting to run different directions, because they never want to talk to security. When security comes, it means more work or you've done something wrong. um, but I think part of it, like you said, is a culture. And when I started with the last company I was with, I would go and talk to everybody in every group every morning, just say hello and kind of create that bridge. But yeah, you're right. When you walk into companies, you can definitely tell the delineation between IT and security, and it doesn't seem to stop as long as I've been in the industry, and it's been a really long time. But yeah, like I think there's a lot of negative connotation that goes along with security and some of the operations that we do to help keep people safe, like the phishing campaigns. I actually had a boss that wanted to buy one of those Billy Bass, the singing fish that they have like at Walmart or whatever. I wanted to buy one of those, and when people failed the phishing campaigns, put those on their desk. And I thought, how rude, like, what is that accomplishing, other than telling all their peers that they completely failed the phishing campaign. So I try to look at it from a positive standpoint, and instead of highlighting numbers, maybe highlight the complexity of the test and stuff like that. Because common sense says that people are going to be the weakest link no matter what. Phishing campaigns, we know that at least 75% of the people are going to fail. That's just, over the years, I've never seen anything below 75%. So that's pretty bad. So when you're giving like consultation and advice on architecture, security architecture, how many times have you been asked about AI or ML in the past year? Because I know that for me, when I hear artificial intelligence and machine learning, it really just makes me cringe. It gives me that tingle down my spine. I don't even want to be involved in a conversation, because I think a lot of our industry has been kind of poisoned by the idea of relying on artificial intelligence or machine learning. So what's your thought on that as far as our AI and ML go?
It is definitely the new buzz thing, isn't it? Like everyone's talking about it. That's what everyone wants, and
Yeah.
I'm with you. Yes, it maybe long term, once it gets a little bit better, it might help us. But I think it's they need to stop trying to go down that the river of the AI and ML and sort of, like we said before, that just focus on the basics. Stop trying to follow these fancy little buzzwords that everyone's trying to sell them at the time, and
Yeah.
do the real things that they need to do. And it irks me a little bit the same. Like it's the conversation, everyone wants it, everyone thinks that's their cure and their solution. But I think maybe long term it might be a good component to have part of, but definitely not the silver bullet that's going to save them all that they think it is. But I think and to technically speaking, the AI is not real AI anyway. It's all pretty much machine learning anyway. So
Exactly.
but that's a generic other stereotype conversation that they all sort of been sold on. So but definitely not a thing that I love so much. But I agree with you. It's an irk.
Yeah, a lot of people don't even know what hides behind the AI engines most of the time, and really that's Bayes' algorithm. And Bayes' algorithm is based on, behavior and predictive behavior and predictive analysis. But the whole downfall, and I try to explain this to people, is when you're taking a gauge on predictable behavior and past historical behavior. If the network is already hosed, guess what you have? You have a hosed AI engine, because all it's doing is looking at the previous traffic going, oh, that looks great. It's here before, so it must be acceptable. So I think that's the number one issue with AI. I can see AI becoming more acceptable and maybe more advanced and actually doing AI functions if people rip out their entire network and start out with AI or machine learning from the ground up. But with the current status of how people are trying to roll out AI, they're just rolling it out on top of. It's like putting lipstick on a pig. It's still a pig. It just has a flashy interface on it. So people in AI
I like that.
spend.
That's a good statement.
It's true. So I mean, people spend tons of money on these AI platforms, and really, it just once it rains and all the lipstick is washed away, you're still left with a pig. So. Anyways, what do you see from your point of view? What do you see as being the biggest challenge for 2021 post pandemic?
I think post-pandemic, I think we'll be cleaning up all of those rush implementations of getting everyone working from home. I think that's probably going to be a hangover we're going to have for at least 12 months, maybe longer. With the organizations I've been involved with, they're starting to get them to go back and clean up some of those configurations and tidy things up. But I think, that's definitely going to be a huge hangover for a while. And I think we're just kind of going to have to dig in and clean up what we can and fix what we can and make adaptations for what we can't fix that has been put in wrong. And just do our best, I guess. But definitely a horrible hangover for at least 12 months, I think.
Exactly. And one of the things that attracted me to your profile, and I've been watching your profile for quite a while before I asked you to come onto the show. You're one of the few guys, one of the few experts that I see in their profile that notates the fact that they look at things from an optimistic viewpoint. And that is not always the case in our industry, especially in security. It seems to be a lot of people like me who are look at the pessimistic side because I guess we've been in too long, or other people who look at the doom and gloom because that produces revenue, right? But yeah, I really respect that. When I read that on your profile, I thought, first of all, that's bold. I can definitely respect that. And then secondly, like, it's the right attitude to have, because if you walk into a building or a company with the idea of helping them out and you see the mess that they've created, sometimes it's hard to stay positive. But the fact that you look at everything from a positive aspect, like, I want to model myself after that because I fail at that so bad sometimes. What about you, Tremy?
I always try to be optimistic.
Tremy's like,
It takes a lot to ruin my day.
Tremy always has a smile on her face. I, on the other hand, take things a little bit too personal, and I get stressed out over ridiculous stuff. But I've seen it a million times in the industry, and it's like, after a while it gets frustrating. It's like, why can't we work as an industry and like really kill these issues? But yeah, I mean, when you get people that are in it for money and not for the passion, you're gonna have those problems. So
Yeah,
what?
I usually find that like when people are stressed out or is when like like I kick in and I'm the cheerleader comes out and I'm just like, all right guys, we can do this, teamwork. But usually when everyone's fine is when I start falling apart.
Yeah, well, that's your break, and that's okay. I mean, that those things happen, especially in our industry. And it's pretty common. Um, so, where do you see yourself, Craig, in let's say 5 years from now? Do you see yourself continue to be an author and maybe expanding on that and maybe trying to hit some like really thick novels, big projects, or is that something that you're going to keep the rate you're going and just kind of throw that into your whole huge portfolio of stuff you do?
I think probably 5 years time, I think I definitely think I still will keep writing. It's probably always going to be my bit of a side project, unless something crazy happens and people love it and I don't need to do the other stuff anymore. But I still really enjoy the security side of things. So I think it's going to always be a big part of it unless I don't have time to do it anymore. But at this stage, I think, yeah, definitely security and probably more blue team instead of the red team like I've sort of sat in before now. I am enjoying the challenge of being on the inside and sort of trying to help fix those sort of problems instead of trying to break them. But I think it's a bit of a switch of the sides and I quite enjoy that. But so probably somewhere on the blue team. Not entirely sure exactly where that will be at this stage, but yeah, definitely blue team side, I think. But with the writing wise, I've sort of doubled down a bit. I'm doing some more like sort of a standard column. I'm doing one with the Women in Security magazine. I'm contributing to that
Very cool.
on their bi-monthly sort of magazine. And books wise, I think the Hacker I Am, as long as I can think of topics, I think I'm going to keep putting them together. And I think there'll be more of them coming out. Your volume 3 up to whatever that ends up being. I like the naming convention because it's volume 2, volume 3. It just keeps going, nice and easy.
Okay.
I don't have to keep
Perfect.
thinking of names. So it's perfect for me. But the current book I'm working on now, which is actually a hacker fantasy or cyberpunk, I think is the official term they use for him, is
Yeah.
probably a new bit of a line I'm sort of going down. I always sort of, since I started doing the writing and the first book was a little bit of excess, I liked the idea of doing a novel and I thought, why not just give it a go, see how it goes. So I'm actually just putting finishing touches on it. It should be out next month, fingers
Very cool.
crossed.
Very cool.
But yeah, it's the writing challenge for that though. I definitely have to say was much harder. I found it a lot more of a challenge to try and put that full one story together. But yeah, I think writing is going to be something I'm going to stick with for a little while. And
What was
yeah, I'm quite enjoying it.
what was the inspiration for your female character lead?
It was probably a little bit my involvement with the Women in Security magazine, and I just think that having a female lead will encourage that sort of people to think outside the box and think, this is normal, like the same as the depiction of the hacker in the hoodie. I love your logo, by the way. I think that's cool. But I generally have a dig at that whole media perception,
Yeah.
and I wanted to make the whole story behind the character and say, look, what you think is a hacker and what you think is what they should look like and who they are is completely wrong, and
Yeah.
get people to think outside that box. And hopefully it works and hopefully people enjoy the story. It was a little bit of a challenge to try and put myself as a guy in a female character,
Yeah,
but
exactly. That's
That's
why I
cool
was.
though.
it's different.
Yeah, yeah. Do you have any friends in security that are women that you kind of talk to just to kind of as you develop this character?
Yes, definitely. Quite a few colleagues and stuff that I talk to all the time and sort of try and, because as a security person myself, I like to try and see everyone else's perspectives, male, female, different cultures and backgrounds. I think that's security-wise, I think that's our best path forward to figure out the problems and do that sort of right path forward. So yeah, I have a chat to pretty much everybody trying to get their sort of mind and what they're thinking of and how they see things. And yeah, it's a challenge sometimes to get that mindset. And I think sometimes I push the edge of whether I get it
What
right or not, but we'll see.
what do you do to get in that mindset? Like I can just picture you like putting on a wig and a robe and like, okay.
Nothing as weird as that. No, I just to be honest, most of the time I don't even think about it. I just write with the idea of the hacker part, not the male female character. And then as I go back with I'm doing the editing part now, I'm like putting some touches to make it more feminine, not just the male orientated view. So that's
Right.
the harder part, going back and making sure it's not too guy sounding, I guess you would say. But yeah, I
Yeah.
think I've got it right, but we'll see.
That's really cool.
Nice. I'm
That's
really
really cool.
excited for it.
Yeah, I think being an author, I have a lot of respect for people who can write. Like I've written like little articles here and there, but the whole idea of a book, like I put people that write books like on a completely different level.
Yeah.
Because for me to keep a thought going on the same train track for that long would take some real discipline and
It's a
some real work.
challenge.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. So you mentioned something about the media and the media's view of hackers, which so on social media, especially LinkedIn. I've been friends with Chris Roberts for ages. He was one of the
Oh,
first
Chris,
people
he's
that
cool. Yeah,
he's awesome.
yeah,
He's great
yeah.
people. He's one of the first people I shared a stage with. He came to Charlotte, North Carolina to speak to Bank of America about future vulnerabilities and trends. This was post, I think, airplane issue. Um, but we talked, and he's always been a big advocate for changing the way the media looks at hackers and the whole hoodie aspect. And so at first I felt kind of bad because I kind of instigate that attitude or that look, I guess. But I've been so comfortable in a hoodie since I was like, I think there's a picture of me at 3 years old with a hoodie on. So it's something I've always lived in. But so here's the deal. I totally agree with the way that the media portrays hackers is probably not the best, and I think that a movie or a TV show that went a little bit too far, I think, in the negative connotation of the word hacker, um, which they also did a fantastic technical job, was Mr. Robot. I think they portrayed him horribly as an individual and as a hacker. Of course, the hoodie. Then they tacked on the drug use and the mental issues, and it's like, can they make him look any worse than he already does? So but they did do a service to the industry by actually having like real hacks, and we've done a couple of the hacks here on the podcast live to show people that it does work. It's legit. They did a really good job there. Um, but for most people in the industry and people coming in, I always tell them, look, yeah, the media does do a bad job at defining what a hacker is. And if you look in Webster's dictionary, it's a mix, right? So you have one entry that says that they do bad things and compromise systems, but on the other entry, it talks about innovation and developing ideas, which are both very accurate. But I do think we need a better image. But I want people to be who they are, and that's the biggest thing for me. Like we were around probably way before the industry actually existed. When I got into the industry, there was no such thing as like ethical hacking. So to throw away the hoodie and give that up forever, I don't think I could do it. So other than that, what do you think about the media's coverage? Since we're on the media, what do you think about the media's coverage of SolarWinds and how much of it do you think they've actually disclosed and how much of it do you think they're actually probably not able to disclose or not willing to disclose at this point?
I think with that particular incident and probably many others, they usually blow it out of proportion a little bit, make it a little bit more of a Hollywood style. Let's make some money. Let's make this a big sort of scare tactic because that's normally the style they go.
Mhm.
I think they probably, most of what they're saying is probably all they know. They probably don't know a lot of the details, which isn't surprising. And they probably make up some stuff as well, but we won't get into that. But yeah, I think that's kind of standard. They like to sell the big event, the big incident, the big problem, and don't really look at what the real incident is, because probably the real incident is probably not as exciting as they're making it out anyway.
Right.
It's probably a really bad breach, and it's probably a bad incident. I think there's failures probably from a lot of people that have caused it, but I think they need to. No system is secure these days. I think they just got to live with the fact that everything's unsecure, and we're just here to make it as good as we can make it as secure as we can. But yeah, I think it's all about the airtime for them. They just selling the story, making it as entertaining as possible, and the general public love it. They love to hear it, and they eat it up when they do sell it. So yeah, it's just the way it is.
That's another thing the media does a really bad job at, is actually explaining things on a technical level and dumbing it down so people understand. I think with SolarWinds, a lot of the impact was lost because the normal citizen, everyday citizen, probably didn't grasp 95% of what was being said. And also with the government, we're not going to know all the government systems it hit or to the impact. But doing DoD testing, government testing, like pen testing, red teaming, what I found out is that it's hard to glamorize some of the compromises that the U.S. in specific goes through, because how glamorous is it when someone has like using a default password on a government system? It's really hard to make that look, media worthy and movie worthy, but it's truth. I mean, that's, it's not hard for these big attacks to take place. All it takes is, one decent vulnerability that nobody patches for. um, and tell me why a government is using open source patching, downloading open source code into, systems like that.
Seems
I
like
don't
a
know.
bad idea, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Just straight up.
Yeah, just common sense. But again, like, if people did the basic things correctly, they wouldn't have to worry about any kind of massive breaches or stuff like that. Yeah, it's always going to be a possibility, and it's going to happen. It's not if, it's when. But when you have vulnerabilities that are 5 to 10 years old sitting on your network and you're not patching for it, I have little sympathy for anybody in that situation. But and the funny thing too is that everybody's first reaction is, let's yank all of our architecture, get that shit out, and build it again. And it's like, you're gonna build just as bad a network as you did before. So why not just fix what you have first? So I don't know. I'm a little jaded when it comes to patching and IT management and asset management, because as a pen tester over 20 years, I've seen some really bad ideas and bad design.
I kind of agree with you on that. Like, particularly with like your pen testing and your scanning and that sort of stuff. You do a pen test and you come back 12 months later and the same problems are still sitting there, and they haven't patched, they haven't updated, they haven't secured anything different. You just sit there and go, why are we doing this? You're just ticking the box,
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
It's
wasting
exactly
everyone's time. And I'm a positive guy. I try and see, let's do everything constructive. But when they do that, you just sit there and go, okay, that's just silly. Just don't bother ticking the box at all. It's a waste of time. You're not doing anything. You're not improving. Yeah, and it's frustrating. Yeah.
I have a lot of envy for people and a lot of respect for people who do architectural design and consulting, because walking to some of these companies, hearing some of the things that I hear when it comes to talking about technology or architecture, like, I just want to get a sock and put a bar of soap in it and swing it at people when they start talking. Because it's like, do you realize what you're doing? When I look at your network and I find 500 WannaCry vulnerabilities sitting on your internal network, but it's okay because it's internal. I want to have a sock in each hand with soap in it, and going out to a site and doing that for a living, and giving people advice on how to architect a safer network, a safer environment. Again, you're going to deal with ROI, you're going to deal with the price tags, you're going to deal with the whole program, budget. And that's the part that I think hurts our industry. As I think people really do want to secure things, but I think that numbers and return on investment gets in the way, and always has. So if you look at security in a traditional historic way, a lot of companies didn't want to dump money into security groups from the get-go because they saw no return on investment. And so, I think companies are getting a little bit better at looking at that and saying, okay, there's no return on investment, but if we have a breach, how much are we going to save in recovery and disaster recovery? Um, so yeah, so I'd be interested to see what kind of crazy stories you have from going in and doing consulting in companies, and looking at what they want you to build out, or what, getting advice for you on what to put into the network and what you've seen in their current state. I bet you've got some killer stories.
I've probably got a few. Not all of them I can talk about, but I've definitely got a few. And the thing is, like what you're saying before, is that it's pretty common. You see it a lot where they come in and, oh, it's inside our wall, nothing's getting here. We don't need to protect this stuff. And I'm like, yes, you do. Like the wall is just the edge. And in systems these days, there is no real wall. There is no real boundary. It's people are everywhere. There's too many different devices. They're in too many different locations. They've got to stop looking at that outside. Let's make the wall nice and hard and do nothing inside it. Yeah, they need to break that whole perception of things. But yeah, you get it all the time. It's like, oh, we just spend all this money, we'll get this nice tech on the outside. But the funny thing about that nice tech is a lot of the time they get it, spend all this money, and then don't really set it up anyway. So it's got the very basic configurations, and they're not doing what they could with those devices or those expensive units that they were designed for. Yes, I still don't think any of them are silver bullets, but if they paid for it, make it work how it's supposed to.
Exactly.
Yeah,
And
I always wonder that, like, if you're putting all that money in, because it's in like the hundreds and thousands I've heard some companies spend to get these fancy solutions put in, and then you don't get a dedicated person to configure it. So it's like, what's the point?
it
I
doesn't
don't
make sense.
understand that. Yeah, I don't understand that. I want to find out why, but everyone I talk to is also surprised.
It's about that whole, I think it is, they bought the solution and to their board and everything else, they've got this big fancy thing and they tick that little box saying, yep, we have that now and we're all protected. But like you said, they don't have a person inside that actually knows how to use it, knows how to work it, or even bring in somebody outside that can actually, help them configure it and help them learn how to use it as best as possible. It's just,
Yeah.
it's a big expensive brick sitting over there that doesn't do a lot.
As a pen tester, do you find it challenging when you're doing an engagement at a company to kind of like talk to their IT team? Because I know in some cases, like for us, some IT teams are really great to work with. Like they kind of see us as a team, and then we come across some that just hate us. They're like, oh gosh, you're gonna tell me what I'm doing wrong about my job. So kind of tell me about your experience with that relationship with pen testing and an IT team.
I think you're right. Like I've probably almost a 50-50 split where
Right.
you sit there and you go like, let's do this. We start to talk to them and start to figure out what the engagement is and everything. And you've got on one hand, there's some that will work with you and try and do everything and try and help you get the most out of the whole situation. And then you get the other ones that just like you're the enemy. You're
They're on the
completely
defensive, right? They're always on the
it's
defensive, and
straight up and
yeah,
it's
and the
like
ego's in the way,
yeah.
and you're just like, dude, I'm just trying to help.
I think egos is probably the biggest issue with a lot of them. They don't see you as someone that's trying to help, and I always
Right.
approach that to try and do that direction as I'm not here to pull the rug out from underneath you and make you look bad. I want you to get more secure. I want to help you do it, and I will do it as softly as they want me to do it. I'll make sure it's nice and smooth for them and they don't look bad. I'm not there to make anyone look bad. I want to help them, and
Yeah.
that's the hard part, is getting those ones with the ego and they're just hands off straight away and go, no, I'm not helping you. You're the enemy here. I think we need to try and get those sort of people out of that road, I think, and bring in the people that are willing to help you solve the solutions, and because that's what we're there for. Like that, they're not testing some are just testing for the tick box, but most of them actually want to make their system secure. Like Mike said before, like people really want to do that, and if we're there, we're helping, we're finding things. And yes, sometimes it's human mistakes, and sometimes it's oh crap, I did that. Put your hand up, own it.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
It's
Exactly.
all about the education, the lesson, and let's just fix them. We're
I
going to
think
get nowhere, and we're all going to be talking the same stuff again in 12 months if they don't work with us, really.
exactly, and the culture hasn't changed much since the beginning, the inception of like vulnerability assessments and stuff like that. Because Frenchie just sent me a message, and it's true because I say this pretty much on every podcast: is nobody wants a pen tester to come in their company and tell them their baby's ugly. Like go into a maternity ward and tell a mother her baby's ugly and tell me what happens afterwards.
That sounds dangerous. Yeah.
It's not going to be
Sounds
good.
dangerous.
So you get the same thing with security. These people spend in some places millions of dollars building these networks, and the last thing they want is someone to come in and say, "Yeah, you're gonna have to spend X amount more because you're vulnerable. Your baby's unfortunately ugly." And it happens all the time. I've even had companies that try to get me to manipulate the findings so that it wouldn't be
Yeah,
a
yeah.
finding. And I'm like, I'm sorry, but an admin password and clear text to every server on your network at a hospital is a vulnerability. Like I can't take that out. But people like that want to fight it because, again, they're looking at facing funding issues, or if they get a bad, report or brief from a pen test, vulnerability assessment, the board looks at it and, it's all metric driven, which is so sad. And that goes back to treating people like people. Is when you have a company that's metric driven, and it's metric driven, and you hire into this company walking in knowing that your bonus and your value is based on a metric, that's a problem. Like, it should be work as a team, and your value as an individual, not as somebody who does an input on a spreadsheet. But I think that's one of the things too, that once we battle that and change that aspect of the industry, I think security in general will increase because people feel valuable again. Because right now, if you look at the industry as a whole, especially during the pandemic, how many things that we do is starting to be automated or remotely controlled, right? So a lot of the pen testing, a lot of the vulnerability assessment can now be automated and timed. Um, and when you look at like actual producing, exploit code or being that pen tester, and you have to be that human behind the console, that value is still not there, because really what they want is the paperwork, the report that comes out of that tool. That's the most important. And maybe one person per company that can talk to a C level, which is getting harder and harder to do. Now that we're opening up the ranks to the industry for anybody with a CEH. Um, but yeah, I think that once people start getting that passion back and actually we start treating people like people, then we're going to get better security, and it'll be a lot quicker. Um, yeah, well, I think we still have a ways to go, but I like the optimism that Craig has. I wish I could buy some of that at Walmart, because it would probably help me my interactions day to day. But that's my goal for this year, is being more optimistic rather than pessimistic and cynical when it comes to what I know to be true for the industry. Um, and that's the hardest part. You always want things to get better, but it's difficult sometimes when you look at some of these organizations that refuse to change. Um, but that's where we come in, and that's why I like bringing people on the show. Is these are people that are going to be leaders in that space, and that are leaders and can have the ability to influence and change that direction. So that's really important to me, especially like you guys down in Australia. Like, I don't know what it is, but most of our viewers are in Australia. Um, Maybe it's that criminal streak in Australia. I'm not really sure. That's kind of what's been pointed out previously.
Who knows?
Yeah, right.
Yep.
Um, anyway, so do you have any questions for us, Craig? Is there anything that you want to know about as far as our community, or what we're doing here, or any of that stuff? We're open for questions as well.
No, not really. Like I've been sort of watching you guys a little bit before you sort of invited me to come on. I like the idea of sort of sharing the information and making it an open community. I think the industry itself has been sort of cloaked for too long. I think we need to sort of come out there a little bit more, and we need to talk about things more and show who we are. And I think that's I love that about the whole community you've got going. And I think no questions, but I think he's doing a good job. And yeah, I reckon it's great. Keep it up.
Awesome. We appreciate it. And you're welcome back anytime you want, whether it's into the Discord server, or, you just want to be an extra voice on the podcast. Anytime you're on, I'll co-host you and you can jump right in.
Sounds good.
So anybody have any questions for Craig, go ahead and send it through the chat. The chat will come directly to me, and I'll ask the questions of Craig. So if you have any, fire away.
Craig, when does your new book come out, Foresight?
I've was putting the finishing touches on my last edit this morning when I was waiting to come on. So I'm thinking around sort of mid to end of next month, if everything goes to plan. So the cover and everything's all done, the writing's all done. It's just some final sort of little tweaks and little twitches here. So I think within a month definitely. It's
Awesome.
It's called Foresight. Should be hopefully good.
Awesome. So how much in a ballpark way, how much is it costing to get one of those books published? I'm really curious to, for my own personal reasons.
Yep. With the sort of indie publishing sort of style of things, the most expensive part, apart from time and labor, is probably your cover work. And if you want to pay someone to do the editing, I have a few people that I send it to, and they do a bit of a read through and a bit of a tidy up. So I don't use an official editor. They just give me feedback and tell me what they think, and point out my spelling and grammar mistakes, which strangely as a writer I do a bit. But yeah, it's probably the most expensive part is the cover work. Getting someone to design a cover and make something pretty, because I have no skills when it comes to that. I can write, but I definitely don't have any artistic side on that stuff. So, but yeah, you're looking a couple of $1,000. You can do a lot of that sort of stuff, and you're looking probably another sort of same if you want to pay an editor to do the editing for you. But if you do it yourself, it's more time, and it probably takes me almost 12 months a book to get through, sort of in my own time. So we're looking probably 5 to 10 hours a week working on the book. So it is a bit of a time hungry thing, but yeah, if it's a passion, you just go with it, I suppose.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
What's your process for writing the book? Do you kind of like do a general outline and then you go in and fill the details, and then you've got like a cast of characters? And do you have any characters that you kill off in this book?
I don't kill anyone off. I think I probably could, but with the fantasy one, I did do a bit of a general rundown. Like I mapped out sort of most of the chapters and put a rough idea of what I wanted to sort of achieve in each of those, and put some main characters, and sort of decided on the names and who I was going to bring in and who I wasn't. And I generally followed that, but I still went with my gut as I was writing each chapter, and sort of just went with the storyline, and I deviated a little bit and then sort of come back a little bit a few times. But yeah, I think that's just part of the writing process. You just got to go with what you feel, and then clean it up later. You can always clean it up later if you go a bit too crazy. But yeah, that was general plan, and then just went with it, went chapter by chapter and just pushed through it. But with my the awareness type ones, there's no real plan. I just will pick the topics I want to write about and just write one at a time, and just have some fun when I'm writing each, and yeah, decide which ones I keep in there and which ones I don't. There was a few that I dropped out, I didn't keep in the books, but yeah, most of them are in there.
It's pretty
Nice.
cool. You should have like I don't know if you remember the books from back in the day, the Choose Your Own Adventure books. Do you remember those?
I like those. Yeah, I like those.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like that would actually be kind of a cool idea for a cybersecurity book. You give them, multiple choices, and each choice deviates the way the story is played out. Be kind of cool. Um, yeah, we know a pretty good illustrator as well. She's pretty badass with graphics.
So the one we're doing with the nice logos. Yep.
Yeah, yeah. Tramy did all of them. She did all the logos for the
I remember
podcast.
that.
Yeah, remember that.
Yeah, let me know what I can do to help. Yeah,
Yes.
I like design, and I really love doing design work for cybersecurity, because it's like all these like cool tech graphics and lightings that I don't typically get to do in the corporate world, where it's just boring.
A
So
bit more
yeah,
fun. Get to be a bit crazy.
it's
Yep.
more fun. Yeah, be a little bit crazy. Like I don't ever get to do a logo like the Haunted Hacker logo, and with this kind of brand and theme, where it's a little dark and kind of like like Matrix glitchy kind of thing. So yeah, it's fun. I would definitely love to help with any book covers. If you've got any, I won't charge you $1,000. I just do it for funsies.
Okay. Sounds great to me.
Yeah.
So I don't have any other questions. Last call for questions in the chat.
Yeah, I
I
do have one last question for Craig, and it has to do with sharing threat intelligence. So I heard in one of your podcasts that you mentioned that one of the things that you recommend is that seeing more organizations sharing threat intelligence with each other, because right now they're very protective of that information, right? So you don't want to necessarily share threat intelligence with a competitor. But what do you think about, just having industries that are complementary to each other, not competing, sharing information, like a bank and a tech company, for instance?
I think that's a good idea, and I've sort of part of they call it PISN, which is just a group in sort of Brisbane, Australia here, that we sort of just try and sort of get together once every few months and share some what we're doing and what's not working and what's working. And I think you're right. Like, I think if they can at least get that same sort of industries together, and no one's going to share everything. There's certain stuff that they're going to keep to themselves. But I think if we can all help each other a little bit and at least share those, what isn't working, what is working, get some ideas from other people, I think it's going to be easier for everybody. And we're all, overworked as it is. And I think, anything that can make our lives a little bit easier, I think is a good idea. I think we're going to sort of be like pulling teeth almost. It's going to be hard to get anyone to really do it, particularly when you're talking about like your managed service providers and your security providers like that.
Yeah.
Getting them to share that kind of stuff is difficult,
Very difficult.
to say the least. But I think we can do it. I think if we drop the egos a little bit and share what we can, like, yes, like I said, we can't share everything.
I would love for people to drop egos in the tech world, but
there's
like
so many, isn't there?
but how do you change someone's behavior? I don't know if that's something that we can necessarily change, because that's something that person needs self-awareness so that they can change themselves, right?
Punishment.
Punishment. Yeah. I've been very fortunate. I've met a lot of really nice, kind, and passionate people in the industry, but I've also come across people with egos, and I don't know if it's COVID and I'm not going to the office and seeing people and we're doing podcasting, but it's like, I almost don't know how to react or respond when I see someone like with an ego. Like my natural reaction is I just shut down. So yeah, I really, those people with egos out there, please work on it.
Yeah, that's
I think they have to.
Part. Yeah, and I think that's part that's been around IT for a really, really long time. I remember working for internet service provider. We had some of the admins that had been there from the inception of the company, and the ego. Wow, it's like you almost have to ask permission to walk into their space. It's like the value that they put on these people was ridiculous. But when you're dealing with the industry that is very infantile, it's very new. People with that level of knowledge were gold mines, hard to find. But yeah, Luke said send the people with egos to work in tech support. I agree, completely agree with that.
Humble them out. Yeah.
They will hate that, but good option.
Punishment. So that's that one last point I wanted to make too is that article. I read an article that you wrote on CSO magazine about Five Eyes. I thought that was really interesting and insightful. In a couple,
I got a few raised eyebrows from that from a few places I consult with, but we won't talk about that.
yeah, I'm sure. If you want to give just a brief synopsis of what you were talking about in the article to the people who haven't read it, it was really interesting. I found it really interesting. I read it and had to sit back and think for a few minutes because I've worked for some of those Five Eyes, and the amount of distrust they have just within their own little group is ridiculous. So why don't you go ahead and give a brief synopsis of that, and we'll do a last call for questions, and that'll be it.
From what I remember, it was a little while ago I wrote it, but the general gist of it, I believe, was around particularly the new Australian law that was being brought in at the time about, I suppose you would say the perception was that the government wanted the backdoor into the systems. I don't think that's technically what they were really after. They just wanted a way to be able to legally request information from any of those providers to have that intel or information, or from whatever their target was, whoever it was. And I think that whole concept is probably wrong. I don't think they should have went down that path of, kind of requesting a backdoor from these providers, the applications and stuff like that. I get there's the whole need for some of the, your terrorism and that sort of stuff to get that kind of information in an easier way. But I don't think that's the right way to do it. I think they need to do it a better way. Whether that's powers to, get the information from the person itself, the one that's under arrest or something like that. I think that's still a better way, even though they can't always make them do it. But I think that sort of powers is still better than trying to force providers to give them information into their systems. It's just making them put that backdoor in or something to enable that. And I agree completely with some of those providers where they're just refusing, which I think that's a good thing. I think they need to still stick to their customers. I think, yes, platforms get abused for different reasons, but that's no reason to make everybody insecure and lose everyone's sort of right to do it without any sort of threat of being sort of watched or something like that. So
Yeah, and that's been kind of so when I worked for Verizon, a lot of the US providers are required by federal law to have taps into their systems so that the FBI or Department of Justice can have, easy access once they obtain a warrant. But what I found is that those taps were not necessarily being used the way they were supposed to be used. Um, and I think that all goes back to, when Snowden leaked the information he did about X key score. It's supposed to be based on, certain keywords or certain factors. But we all know that, given access, someone's going to take advantage of that access, whether it be the people who are supposed to be running the program or people who take advantage of the fact that that program exists, right? Um, so yeah, I'm not a big advocate for putting eternal taps, in people's and providers' networks. Yeah, and that's another thing I talked about previously was security of the provider, right? So internet service providers provide a connection, but they don't provide any protection whatsoever. Which they'll tell you that they don't do that. Um, but they also provide on ramps to online gaming, to all kinds of things that could be used for, violation of any kind of law or even, anti-terrorism acts, right? So you would think that internet service providers would be required to provide some sort of security. And I think if they would step up and actually start looking into that and embracing some of that, maybe the need for an eternal tap in some of these ISPs wouldn't be needed. But even in the US, like the InfraGard, FBI works with only critical infrastructure companies. Um, and they share intelligence and they share bulletins. I was part of the InfraGard for quite a while. But the problem is that the intel was not actionable. I didn't find the data the FBI was giving back to the industry as being actionable. They sometimes they would have ransomware with, they give us a hash to identify the file, but it'd be like 10 weeks post deployment, like the hash has already changed by then. But they were really, adamant about getting intel from the different industries. So that's the problem that, reading that CSO online article made me think about our current structure in the US. And I think the biggest problem we have is, you know, intelligence feeds and intelligence in general is a commodity, right? It's something that we're going to pay for. But a company who doesn't have an intel feed, but has, defensive measures and platforms in place to help stop what could possibly be going on, they should probably take all that equipment out and sell it if they're not going to have a threat feed. Because to me, security in a network without a threat feed is pretty much useless. You have to have an idea as to what's going on outside. So hopefully one of these days, Five Eyes and the US will be able to get, that information flowed down to where it's not unidirectional, it's bidirectional. And I think that's the biggest problem with industries. Industry doesn't want to give intel to government because they know they're not getting anything in return. So, it's one of those battles I think we'll be fighting for a while. But then you also have to take consideration that, governments aren't very high on the fact of encryption either. So another battle that we constantly fight and try to maintain. So anyways, I'll get off my soapbox. Really appreciate you coming on, Craig. It was awesome. I look forward to, your next book coming out. And I might ping you later on with some tips and pointers because eventually I think I'm going to go down that route. Kudos and congratulations for taking that dive and being successful and having books out there that are making some good money. That's awesome. And it's really cool that you get back to the industry like that. Again, welcome anytime. Another great interview. Tremi, any questions? If not, I'm gonna wrap it up.
Yeah, no, we're good. Thank you so much for your time, Craig. And I'm really excited for your book, Foresight,
Foresight,
right?
yes.
Foresight. Yeah, I'm super excited to read it because I've never read any cybersecurity book that isn't, a nonfiction. So
It's gonna be awesome.
No worries. It's definitely been fun. I've enjoyed the chat, and yeah, definitely be back at some point.
Cool. Thanks, Craig. Have a good one.
No worries.
Talk to you
Have a
guys
good
next
one.
week.
Thanks, everyone.
Nice. Bye.
Bye.